I'm Audrey Mills, 34, a valuables appraiser. Christmas Eve. The tree was twinkling, the turkey was perfect. Then Blair, my spoiled younger sister, picked up my phone to check the weather. Instead, she found an open email displaying my last financial statement. Her gasp wasn't festive. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated greed. She had seen the total, $10 million. What did my parents demand the moment they heard about the $10 million? And how did that request finally validate my worthlessness in their eyes? I was always the other daughter. While my sister, Blair, was lavished with attention and every expensive toy she demanded, I was quietly tucked into the corner, reading books, teaching myself, completely self-reliant by age 10. My parents, Thomas and Helen, didn't neglect me out of malice, they neglected me out of convenience. I was low maintenance, so I got low attention. It was a clear, unspoken contract. Blair got the love, I got the silence. That silence forged my resilience. I didn't wait for handouts, I earned them. I channeled my focus into art appraisal, learning to spot true value versus superficial polish. I turned my passion into a lucrative career, becoming an expert in valuing the priceless. I succeeded not despite their neglect, but because of it. They wanted an easy daughter, they got an independent millionaire. Did their treatment of me change when they learned I was worth $10 million? Or did they only see me as what I always was, a walking ATM? In our family's narrative, Blair was the golden child, fragile, artistic, and deserving of constant support. I was the reliable one, the one who got good grades, paid her own way through university, and never asked for anything. This role meant my achievements were invisible, viewed simply as expected maintenance. I wasn't loved for who I was tolerated for what I didn't demand. My value was defined by the lack of drama I created, not the success I built. I learned to anticipate their needs, not because I cared about them, but to manage their disappointment, a skill often mistaken for love. The irony was palpable. I, the art appraiser, was the only one in the family whose value was constantly underrated. I was the priceless antique sitting in the corner, ignored for the cheap, noisy trinkets. I knew that silence was about to break, but I didn't know how loud the explosion would be. When my father, Thomas, finally spoke up after Blair's discovery, what were his exact words of entitlement, and how did my mother, Helen, enable the most selfish Christmas demand imaginable? I didn't find my escape in typical teenage rebellion, I found it in valuation. I spent hours in the public library, studying art history and appraisal science. It was thrilling, the objective, mathematical process of determining real worth, stripping away sentiment and polish. In a home where my worth was subjectively low, this field gave me an unshakable sense of intellectual control and objective truth. I learned to identify authenticity. I was training myself to see beyond the surface, a necessary skill when dealing with family, but a highly profitable one in my career. Did my parents ever once support this passion, or did they only see it as a waste of time compared to Blair's artistic demands? And how did their dismissal fuel my $10 million ambition? Every success I achieved was met with a patronizing nod, quickly followed by a pivot to Blair's needs. I once shared the excitement of appraising a rare painting, a huge professional milestone. "That's nice, Audrey, very stable. But did you remember to transfer money to Blair for her yoga retreat? She needs that creative freedom, you know." My father's words were a constant reminder. My hard work was just a secure backdrop for Blair's entitlement. Blair never pursued financial stability, because she never had to. She genuinely believed her inherent deservingness was superior to my earned merit. They taught her that my discipline and success were simply resources for her use, like a public utility. This blatant philosophy of entitlement was the first real conflict, not the money itself, but the toxic belief that my achievements belonged to the family's golden child. Did this entitlement philosophy stop when they discovered my $10 million, or did it explode into a public demand right there on Christmas Eve? The moment Blair's gasp revealed my $10 million, the festive veneer shattered. Their eyes weren't looking at me, their daughter, they were looking at a lottery ticket, a massive, unexpected windfall that had materialized in their living room. The shock on my father Thomas's face quickly morphed into calculated entitlement, and my mother Helen's expression was a silent, intense calculation of how they could justify taking it all. It was the purest form of disrespect I had ever witnessed. The burning anger I felt wasn't just about the money, it was the final, devastating confirmation that my lifelong hard work, my discipline, and my very identity were all secondary to the potential of their next shopping spree. I stood there, the only stable person in the room, realizing I was a resource to be extracted, not a person to be cherished. That silent confrontation was more painful than any argument. What brazen justification did my father use to demand the money for Blair, and how did his words solidify my plan to cut off the family for good? I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment to switch from daughter to appraiser. My goal was no longer to win their love, but to protect my assets, financial and emotional. I mentally calculated the cost of compliance versus the price of permanent freedom. Compliance meant endless exploitation. Freedom meant walking away with my dignity and my $10 million intact. I chose autonomy. I drew a hard line in my mind. This was the final Christmas performance. I would use my voice, not my wallet, to make my point. What was the chilling, three-word phrase my father used that perfectly summed up their entitlement? And did Blair defend me or instantly join the attack? Despite the $10 million in my account, the old lies still whispered, "You are not enough. Blair deserves it more because she's vulnerable. You are just the machine that generates the resources." That profound sense of invalidation, that my hard-earned wealth couldn't even buy me a seat at the family table, was the lowest point. It wasn't the greed that hurt, but the confirmation that my own parents still didn't see my worth as inherent. All my professional success was worthless in this room, measured against Blair's sheer, unearned need. What was the final, morally corrupt demand Thomas made that forced me to realize I had to choose between my family and my self-respect? And how did I finally shut down the ATM for good? I, the appraiser, began the internal audit of fairness. I had worked 16-hour days for 15 years. I faced down predatory dealers and survived market crashes. Blair spent that time perfecting her vulnerable persona and accumulating debt. Where was the ethical justification for transferring my earned wealth to her unearned entitlement? There was none. My success wasn't luck, it was merit. Recognizing this moral clarity was the antidote to the despair. I didn't owe them my money. I didn't owe them my silence. I owed myself the dignity of defending my achievement. What was the absolute, non-negotiable line my father crossed to trigger the final confrontation? And how did I turn their Christmas greed into my moment of ultimate freedom? After Blair's gasp, I immediately called Sarah, my oldest friend and a corporate attorney. She's the only one who truly understood the transactional nature of the Mills family. I didn't need legal advice yet, I needed emotional validation. "Audrey, I need you to hear this. They don't want to share your success. They want to erase the fact that you succeeded without them. They want to reclaim their parental ownership of your autonomy. Don't let them." Sarah helped me frame the conflict not as a family drama, but as a hostile takeover attempt. My $10 million was the company, my piece was the board of directors. The Mills family is a collapsing financial entity trying a desperate asset grab. Your next move cannot be emotional, it must be strategic. What's your ultimate goal? Is it to teach them a lesson, or is it to secure your peace and protect your assets? The answer was clear: protection. Sarah's perspective gave me the strategic hope I needed to return to that Christmas dinner, not as their daughter, but as a CEO defending her boundaries. Armed with this clarity, how did I manage the final, unforgivable demand from my father? And what was the definitive phrase I used to permanently sever my role as the family's ATM? "I'm not afraid of losing the money, Sarah. I'm afraid of the emotional fallout. They'll try to paint me as the villain who abandoned them on Christmas, the selfish millionaire who rejected her family. I feel guilty, like I should use my $10 million to smooth their entitled demands, just to buy peace. It's the residual programming. Guilt is their last weapon, Audrey. You're not buying peace, you'd be renting resentment. Your money is collateral damage in their war against your independence. Sarah's words were the truth I needed to hear. The money wasn't the issue, the boundary was. The only wise investment I could make that Christmas was in my self-respect. I needed to reject their narrative entirely and make it clear that the price of my dignity was non-negotiable. Even for the family name. The time for justification was over. The time for action was now. What was the exact moment, the single, most infuriating demand, that pushed me past guilt and straight into the cold clarity of cutting ties forever? The ethical choice was surprisingly simple, though emotionally heavy. My family operated on the principle that my hard work entitled them to a share. My professional code dictated that value must be earned, assessed, and justified. I couldn't ethically participate in their self-destructive financial expectations. Handing over $10 million would not save Blair, it would merely validate her destructive behavior and confirm their belief that I was disposable as long as I provided capital. As an appraiser, I delivered my final, internal judgment. The cost of the Mills family relationship now far exceeded its emotional value. The deal was off. How did I use my art appraiser skills to finally put a price tag on their toxic behavior right before walking out of their lives forever? I knew the confrontation had to happen on Christmas. It wasn't about drama, it was about maximum clarity. Their demand, made in the presence of seasonal expectation, needed an equally dramatic and definitive rejection. I wasn't just planning to say no, I was planning to issue a final professional appraisal of the Mills family relationship, distressed asset, no future value. My goal was a complete, permanent exit with zero chance of re-entry. I packed light, leaving only one essential item, the old silver necklace. I knew that when I walked out, I would be taking nothing of theirs with me, only the memory of the one person who truly loved me. What was the precise, arrogant phrase my father used to claim my $10 million was rightfully theirs, and how did I deliver the most devastating professional appraisal they ever received? Driving there, my heart was a drum against my ribs, but my mind was utterly clear. I wasn't just mentally preparing a script, I was rehearsing a business exit strategy. I preemptively blocked the inevitable guilt trips, the crying fits from Blair, and my parents' aggressive financial maneuvers. The key was to be unflappable. I reminded myself, this is not a negotiation. It is a declaration of independence, and no amount of emotional manipulation would change the terms. I knew their deepest fear wasn't losing the $10 million, but facing the truth, that their reliable daughter had built true wealth, while their golden daughter hadn't built anything. My truth was my most potent weapon. I was ready to use it to secure my peace. What was the exact moment they realized I wasn't backing down, and how did my final, devastating line leave them standing speechless in their own home on Christmas? Audrey, that money needs to be invested in the family's future, not just sitting there. Blair needs capital for her new wellness brand startup, it's her passion. You've always been the sensible one, so the best thing you can do is transfer 50% immediately. It's what family does. I stared at the man who prioritized his spoiled daughter's half-baked business idea over my decade of work. He said, it's what family does. He believed his entitlement justified demanding half of my net worth on Christmas Eve. I will not be transferring any funds. This account is not a community asset. Audrey, don't be ridiculous. We are your parents. The last shred of warmth died. Blair, sobbing, instantly joined the attack, confirming her role. Their betrayal was complete. This wasn't about $10 million, it was about the eternal rejection of the daughter who dared to succeed outside their control. How did I use my expertise as a valuables appraiser to give my father a final, devastating estimate of his true worth, and what did I say to Blair that shattered her sense of entitlement forever? You asked what family does, father. As a valuables appraiser, I analyze worth. For years, I valued my relationship with you at full market rate, despite minimal returns. Tonight, I reassess. Your entitlement, your blatant greed, and your years of neglect have rendered your emotional value zero. You ungrateful brat. His shock was pure. He had expected obedience, not a professional audit of his character. Blair, you valued my hard work less than your next yoga retreat. You believe you deserve $5 million without effort. The real lesson of art appraisal is, unearned value is an illusion. I turned my back, a wave of cold, clean freedom washing over me. I had finally put a price on their toxicity and walked away, richer than ever. What was the immediate, desperate threat my father made as I reached the door, and how did I ensure that my $10 million was protected from any legal recourse they might attempt? If you walk out that door, we will hire the best lawyers to sue you for our rightful share. We gave you life, Audrey. We are owed this money. I paused at the threshold. Their desperation was ugly, predictable, and now legally toothless. I smiled internally, remembering Sarah's instructions. I had already transferred the funds into an irrevocable trust, protected by an ironclad legal firewall. Go ahead. You'll find the rightful share clause doesn't apply when you legally signed away parental rights to any financial compensation when I turned 18. Thomas's face went white. Helen's gasp was louder than Blair's had been. The true revenge wasn't the words, but the irreversible, preemptive legal action I had taken. I stepped out, closing the door softly on the glittering chaos behind me. It was Christmas, and for the first time, I felt truly gifted, with freedom and peace. Did my family ever accept the finality of my exit, or did they continue to try and breach my legal firewall in the months that followed, and what was the beautiful, unexpected consequence of my freedom? The silence in the car was deafening, yet it was the most peaceful quiet I'd ever experienced. The oppressive weight of their expectations, their constant need for my labor, my money, my compliance, was finally gone. I looked in the rearview mirror, and saw the Mills house shrinking, its glittering lights now just a tiny, insignificant blur. I wasn't running from anything anymore, I was driving toward everything. The guilt I had felt earlier dissolved completely, replaced by the deep, satisfying sense of done. I had spent my career valuing art, but I realized that night I had just performed my most important appraisal. I had accurately assessed the value of my own worth, and it was infinitely higher than the price of their toxic approval. I had protected my true asset, my independence. What was the ultimate fate of Blair's wellness brand? And how did the news of their financial collapse finally deliver the sweet, professional vindication I deserved? Your silence is an insult, Audrey. Give Blair $5 million to save her brand, or you can consider your relationship with us over. The ultimatum wasn't a threat, it was a gift. They were finally telling me the price of their presence, and that price was exactly $10 million more than I was willing to pay. I looked at Blair, whose tears instantly dried, replaced by pure, expectant entitlement. I realized I was done performing the role of the reliable daughter. Your demand is noted. As my professional judgment, I rate Blair's wellness brand a high-risk asset with a near-zero valuation. Funding it would be fiscal negligence. And since you valued my existence only as a source of capital, my final appraisal of the Mills family, toxic, irrecoverable loss. I resign. Effective immediately, I didn't yell. I spoke with the calm authority of a CEO firing a deadweight employee. What was the desperate, final legal threat my father made as I was walking out the door, and how did my preemptive legal maneuver with Sarah leave him utterly speechless and defeated? You won't get away with this. We'll freeze your assets. You are still our daughter, and you will obey. Funny, father. My attorney, Sarah, preempted that. My assets are safely in an irrevocable trust, protected by a firewall you legally signed 10 years ago when you wanted to avoid child support. The document stated you waive all future claims to my finances. You wanted to cut costs, you just cut yourself off from $10 million. Thomas was speechless. Helen looked like she was viewing a ghost. The only sound was Blair's pathetic whimpering. I had anticipated the threats, the emotional blackmail, but they hadn't anticipated the legal paperwork of their own neglect. I placed the key on the table, the key to the house I'd never felt welcome in, and walked into the cold Christmas air. I was free. Did the Mills family ever truly learn their lesson, or did their desperation push them into a final, catastrophic financial decision that proved my appraisal was tragically correct? I didn't celebrate with a party. My victory was personal and quiet. I poured a glass of the vintage wine I'd saved, not for a family milestone, but for my personal emancipation. I raised the glass to the one person who truly deserved it, myself. I wore the silver necklace my grandmother gave me, a silent reminder of unconditional love, a stark contrast to the conditional contracts the Mills family offered. It wasn't just a drink, it was a sacred, independent moment of unburdening. I looked out at the city lights, no longer seeing a world I had to support, but a world I was finally free to explore. The $10 million was secondary, the self-ownership was everything. I had paid the ultimate price, losing a family that never truly existed, to gain a life that was authentically mine. This was my ceremony, my silent, powerful declaration: the burden is lifted. The future is funded. How did my family attempt to weaponize the legal system against me in the weeks that followed, and what satisfying document did Sarah send them that finally shut down their demands for good? Thomas was true to his word. The threats started immediately. They hired a cut-rate lawyer, sending increasingly frantic letters attempting to challenge the trust. But having Sarah as my ally meant I didn't feel fear, I felt disdain. They were wasting money attempting to breach an iron wall of their own creation. The irony was exquisite. I forwarded every desperate email to Sarah, who handled the cease and desist response with clinical, beautiful efficiency. Their final, pathetic attempt was a voicemail from Helen, laced with fake tears and thinly veiled insults. I deleted it without listening past the first sob. My victory wasn't just retaining the $10 million, it was the ability to silence their noise. I had full, peaceful control over my life, my finances, and my emotional space. The celebration was the quiet. What was the single, fatal financial error Blair and Thomas made in their pursuit of quick money? And how did I learn of the news that confirmed my professional judgment of their business was tragically accurate? Audrey, I just got wind of something that confirms everything you said. Thomas took out a high-interest commercial loan to invest everything in Blair's wellness brand. He leveraged their retirement home. They were betting the entire house on a zero-value asset. It failed spectacularly. They've been served foreclosure papers. Hearing it wasn't satisfying in a vengeful way, it was a pure, tragic professional vindication. My appraisal was accurate. They couldn't differentiate between earned value and wishful value. Their greed, unchecked by my capital, had consumed them entirely. They had tried to take my $10 million to fund their delusion, and in failing, they lost everything they had left. The betrayal was complete, but the consequences were self-inflicted. I felt a distant, academic pity. The audit was over. The value of the Mills family had indeed plummeted to zero. Did they finally come crawling back to me in their utter destitution? And what was the final, devastating act of professional closure I performed to ensure I would never be involved in their financial mess again? The news of their bankruptcy was the cold comfort of an accurate forecast. I felt no joy in their destruction, only the grim satisfaction that I had protected my own future. They had their opportunity for generational wealth. They chose entitled, lazy delusion instead. My withdrawal wasn't their punishment, it was the removal of their unsustainable subsidy. Now, they faced the market reality of their own zero-sum decisions. They got exactly the valuation they deserved. Sarah confirmed that they had exhausted all legal avenues trying to reach my trust. My firewall was impenetrable. There was nothing left to do. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I simply let the silence of my victory speak for itself. Closing the final, toxic chapter of my life with the elegance of a perfectly executed business divestiture. Where did my family end up after losing everything, and how did I ensure that my final action wasn't revenge, but a lasting, public testimony to the worth of self-respect? They did, in fact, come crawling back. Not immediately, but after the foreclosure date was set. Thomas sent a pathetic, lengthy email, shifting between blaming me and begging for a loan to buy back the house. The narrative was still centered on entitlement, not accountability. I felt a pang of cold pity for the shells they had become, but that was all. Send them the certified letter, Sarah. Final confirmation of no contact. No exceptions. They must understand the trust is a financial fortress. The ultimate act of professional closure was yet to come. I instructed Sarah to prepare a public, legally required statement regarding the termination of financial support. It wasn't to hurt them, but to legally distance myself from their impending public collapse. I needed a clear, documented record of my independence, ensuring their debt would never be linked to my asset portfolio. My final word on the matter was not emotional, it was a balance sheet report. Did the legal documentation of my independence finally silence them, and how did I learn of their ultimate whereabouts, confirming their descent into the reality of their own poor choices? Life post-climax was quiet, and quiet was a luxury I had never known. The initial guilt evaporated, replaced by the profound peace of having severed a debt that was never mine to pay. I realized my entire childhood had been about earning conditional acceptance, but true adulthood meant declaring unconditional self-worth. The legal drama faded, the certified letters and the sound of my father's desperate rage became distant, irrelevant noise. I was no longer the family's financial hostage. My $10 million was safe, but the real return on investment was my inner growth. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's an act of necessary self-respect, especially when dealing with toxic entitlement. The family revenge wasn't about their loss, it was about my gain, the unquantifiable asset of freedom. I was finally my own most valuable possession. What was the final, ironic piece of news about my family's destination that Sarah shared with me, and how did I make my final, symbolic investment to celebrate my new life? Thomas and Helen are living in a low-rent, weekly motel on the edge of town. They're effectively destitute. And Blair? She's vanished. They tried calling me, but I blocked them based on your instructions. Destitute. The word hit me, not with satisfaction, but a cold, hollow pang. My mind was professional, they created this liability. My lingering, human instinct was weaker, they are still my parents. I had calculated the cost of my freedom, but I hadn't calculated the sheer, tragic price of their own unbridled entitlement. Thank you for the update, Sarah. Continue to block all communication. My decision was made instantly. I had spent a decade paying their debt. I would not pay their consequences. Did I ever see my parents again? And how did I make the single, most significant investment of my life to ensure the $10 million was used to support the true definition of family? I stood there, watching the city move below me, processing the reality that my childhood home was now a liability being offloaded by a bank. My first instinct, that pang of human guilt, was quickly overridden by the cold, hard logic of years of abuse. If I stepped in now, it wouldn't be saving my parents, it would be inviting the toxicity back into my life, proving that I could always be relied upon to clean up their messes. I was no longer Audrey, the reliable daughter, I was Audrey, the CEO of my own life, and this was an unrecoverable loss on their balance sheet, not mine. I had set the line in the sand on Christmas, backed by the legal firewall. Crossing that line now would invalidate every painful step I had taken towards self-respect. Their crisis was entirely self-engineered. Thomas's reckless loan, Blair's pyramid scheme product, they amplified their own risks the moment they realized my money was safe from them. I took a deep breath. My decision was final, no contact. No rescue. No regret. Instead of dwelling on their failure, I refocused on my future. I decided the money needed to be channeled into something positive, a lasting tribute to the one person who showed me real love. I was going to use my $10 million to redefine what family meant to me. What was the final, beautiful tribute I created using my $10 million? And how did I finally fulfill the legacy of my grandmother by turning my pain into a priceless gift for others? I learned of their final whereabouts, a cramped, weekly motel known locally as a transient living spot. No need for drama, reality was their revenge. The silence gave me space to reflect on the true value of money. $10 million wasn't for revenge, it was for creation. I established the Elsie Mills Art Mentorship Fund, named after my grandmother, the only person who offered unconditional support. The fund is dedicated to providing scholarships and mentorship for young women entering the competitive, often hostile, world of fine art appraisal and restoration. The fund's purpose is to support those young women who, like me, may have the talent but lack the necessary family network or capital. It's my way of turning a poisonous upbringing into a nourishing foundation for others. I didn't save my blood family, but I was building a chosen family, a legacy of empowered, independent women. At the dedication ceremony, I placed my grandmother's silver necklace in a small, discreet display case near the fund's charter. It was a tangible symbol, the conditional chains were broken, and the unconditional love was now flowing freely. I finally achieved true closure. The valuation of my life was complete. I closed the book on the Mills family, opening a new one dedicated to creating real, lasting value. Did I ever cross paths with my parents or Blair again? And what final piece of advice do I have for anyone trapped in a family dynamic where their worth is only measured in dollars? I received one final piece of correspondence. It was a letter from Blair, sent through a third party. She wasn't begging for forgiveness, she was demanding help, claiming my refusal was the reason they were destitute and stating I was legally and morally obligated to save them. The lack of accountability was stunning. Morally obligated? My moral obligation is to the woman who earned $10 million, not to the people who tried to steal it. This wasn't guilt-tripping, it was a final, failed attempt at extortion. I didn't even finish reading the letter. I took it, tore it into tiny pieces, and dropped it directly into the shredder. That simple action was more powerful than any legal document. It symbolized the total destruction of their influence. I was done reacting to their chaos. I had built a fortress around my life, not just of steel and law, but of unshakable peace and unconditional self-acceptance. The ultimate protection was not the trust fund, it was the boundary I finally learned to defend. My life now is the true celebration. I work with passion, I give with purpose, and I live with the quiet certainty that my value is inherent, not granted by others. What is the key lesson about self-worth I learned from this entire ordeal, and what final advice do I offer to anyone facing family financial betrayal? I never saw Blair or my parents again, and that was by design. But one morning, a news alert popped up. Not gossip, but a financial headline. Crypto-linked wellness brand implodes, founder vanishes. It was Blair's company. She hadn't just lost their money, she'd become a minor national joke, exposed for massive financial mismanagement and misleading investors. The $5 million Thomas wanted me to invest would have been immediately incinerated. The irony was that their greed, when unconstrained by my influence, led to swift, total self-destruction. My confrontation wasn't yelling across a Christmas tree, it was reading this headline. It was the market delivering the final, objective judgment. They had bet their lives on illusion, and reality cashed out the chips. I felt no satisfaction, only the unaffected calm of someone who had successfully divested from a volatile, toxic asset before the inevitable crash. I closed the article. End of story. So what was the single, most important lesson I took from this entire experience? And what final advice can I give you about choosing peace over obligation? So, no calls, no emails, no guilt? That's the best outcome, Audrey, none. Because of you, Sarah. You showed me that a financial advisor can be a better family than your blood relatives. My $10 million is safe, growing, and being used to fund the Elsie Mills Fund. That fund is my real family legacy now, built on unconditional support, not conditional contracts. The confrontation was over, replaced by the warmth of chosen connection. I learned that the most profound act of revenge isn't the destruction of your abusers, but the radical construction of a better life for yourself. By walking away and using my wealth for positive creation, I finally neutralized the toxicity. The Mills family exists somewhere, dealing with the consequences of their choices, but their debt is no longer my problem. My story is now about self-rescue and self-definition. What is the final, essential step to ensuring permanent emotional and financial freedom from a toxic past, and what is the single, most powerful boundary you must learn to set? Sarah wasn't just my lawyer, she was the architect of my financial freedom and the first person to treat my worth as an asset, not a bargaining chip. To the best legal defense money could buy, and the best friendship I ever earned. You earned both, Audrey. You had the courage to follow through. Most people stall at the confrontation phase. You kept going until the final divestiture was complete. I realized I wasn't alone. I had built a new, healthier support system, my true family. The biggest lesson? Self-worth is non-negotiable. My family taught me the cost of everything but the value of nothing. Sarah taught me how to put an irrevocable price on my peace. That $10 million wasn't just money. It was the capital that secured my future, my independence, and the ability to finally live a life free from financial and emotional blackmail. That is the greatest victory of all. How can you, right now, take the first practical step towards setting your own financial and emotional firewall? And what do you value more than family obligation? With the debt of my past erased, I could finally invest 100% of my energy and capital into my true calling. My career flourished because the mental bandwidth previously consumed by family drama was now dedicated to professional mastery. Teaching young women through the Elsie Mills Fund felt like the greatest appraisal of all, valuing potential, not obligation. I saw myself in their faces, eager, intelligent, and finally free from conditional validation. I wasn't just working, I was building a legacy of independence. I learned that true wealth is quiet. It's the confidence that comes from owning your narrative. I no longer measured success by the size of my bank account, but by the number of young women I could empower to set their own irrevocable price on their worth. I built a life that was both financially bulletproof and emotionally resilient. I was an appraiser by trade, but now, I was an expert in self-valuation. What is the single, most crucial boundary you must implement today to protect your financial and emotional future? And what is the key to turning resentment into lasting freedom? The most profound realization came quietly. My revenge wasn't the loss of their wealth, it was the radical shift in my personal balance sheet. I traded the emotional debt of obligation for the unquantifiable asset of self-respect. I learned that you cannot appraise the value of your own peace high enough. I looked at my grandmother's necklace, a simple reminder that true connection isn't conditional. The only people I owe anything to are the ones who affirm my worth, not those who diminish it. If you are stuck in a toxic family system, remember this: your family's needs are not your emergency. The single, most crucial boundary you must implement today is this: you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Walk away, invest in yourself, and declare your own irrevocable value. That is the ultimate, non-negotiable appraisal. That is true freedom. What does it truly mean to own your story? And how do you ensure that your past remains a lesson, not a life sentence? The shift in my family relationship was simple: it ceased to exist. After receiving Blair's final letter, I spent an hour systematically deleting every email, every photo, every phone number. It wasn't an act of anger, but of emotional cleansing. They had treated me as a business transaction, and now I was performing the final closure of that account. I archived the certified legal documents, but the personal contacts were erased. This action was symbolic. The toxic debt of obligation had been completely discharged. My contact list was now only people who added value, not extracted it. The absence of their drama became my greatest asset. My emotional energy, once spent on preempting their next crisis, was now free to focus on the fund and my career. The space they left was filled with genuine peace and productive purpose. The relationship hadn't merely shifted, it had been reclassified from family liability to historical, closed case. My greatest victory was turning my back on the expectation that I must sacrifice my well-being for their endless needs. What is the real, measurable difference between family and chosen support system, and how do you ensure that your past never writes the narrative of your future? The contrast was stark. On one side, my blood family, endless demands, calculated love, and a total collapse driven by financial delusion. On the other side, my new reality, laughter, genuine support, and professional respect built on merit, not last names. When I look at Sarah and the young women we mentor, I see true reciprocity. They value my guidance, I value their ambition. This is the difference between a relationship based on extraction and one based on mutual growth. My old life was about survival, my new life is about thriving. I often think back to that Christmas dinner and the ultimatum. The greatest gift I gave myself wasn't the $10 million, it was the ability to look at my family's needs and say, "That's not my problem." That single decision unlocked my entire future. My peace is now my most valuable, non-liquid asset. I finally chose myself. Ready for the final takeaway? What is the one thing you must recognize about toxic relationships to fully embrace your own prosperity and self-worth? Your talent is the greatest asset, Lily. Protect it. But remember, the most valuable lesson in this business isn't appraising art, it's appraising people. Never let your emotional value be tied to someone else's transactional needs. That is the first rule of financial self-defense. Through the Elsie Mills Fund, I found my purpose, ensuring the next generation of independent women understood the difference between familial obligation and personal prosperity. My wealth became a tool for empowerment, not a chain of debt. My new responsibility was clear, to rewrite the family script. The Mills name, once associated with exploitation, was now irrevocably linked to opportunity and unconditional support. All thanks to my grandmother's legacy and my decision to draw the line. I didn't get revenge, I got redemption. The best way to move on from a toxic past is to focus your energy entirely on creating a truly valuable future. What is the single, most powerful boundary you must learn to set? And what ultimate message do I have for anyone who feels trapped by the cost of their family's love? Your talent is the greatest asset, Lily. Protect it. But remember, the most valuable lesson in this business isn't appraising art, it's appraising people. Never let your emotional value be tied to someone else's transactional needs. That is the first rule of financial self-defense. Through the Elsie Mills Fund, I found my purpose, ensuring the next generation of independent women understood the difference between familial obligation and personal prosperity. My wealth became a tool for empowerment, not a chain of debt. My new responsibility was clear, to rewrite the family script. The Mills name, once associated with exploitation, was now irrevocably linked to opportunity and unconditional support. All thanks to my grandmother's legacy and my decision to draw the line. I didn't get revenge, I got redemption. The best way to move on from a toxic past is to focus your energy entirely on creating a truly valuable future. What is the single, most powerful boundary you must learn to set? And what ultimate message do I have for anyone who feels trapped by the cost of their family's love? My journey wasn't about $10 million or revenge. It was about defining my own worth against a family that only saw my worth as a financial asset. This story is for anyone who has ever felt that same toxic tug. You are not alone, and your love is not a limitless resource to be exploited. It took me years, but I learned 5 essential lessons I want to share with you today. Lesson number 1. Self-worth is non-negotiable and cannot be monetized. The moment you allow someone to attach a price tag to their affection, you give them the power to devalue you. My family's love was conditional on my wealth. Real love has no transaction fee. Learn this, and you begin the process of emotional divestiture from their chaos. It's the first step to securing your own personal balance sheet. Lesson number 2. The single most crucial boundary is the financial firewall. You must treat your assets, time, money, and mental bandwidth as an impenetrable trust fund. My trust was legal, but yours needs to be emotional and mental. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. The moment you are asked for money under duress, treat it like an attempted corporate takeover. Protect your interests first. Lesson number 3. The ultimate revenge is not their destruction, it is your peace. True victory isn't about watching them suffer the consequences of their choices, it's the profound relief of knowing their choices can no longer affect your life. My serenity is my most valuable non-liquid asset. Don't chase external validation or retribution. Chase the silence that comes from successfully cutting the toxic cord. Lesson number 4. You have the right to redefine family. Blood relations are just history, your chosen relationships are your future. Seek out individuals who celebrate your success and support your boundaries. My lawyer, Sarah, became more family to me than my parents ever were. Invest your emotional energy in true reciprocity, not endless extraction. Build a supportive alliance. Lesson number 5. Use your success to build a legacy of purpose. My $10 million was used to create the Elsie Mills Fund, ensuring that the legacy of my grandmother's unconditional love continued. Don't let your success be defined by what your family lost, define it by what you chose to create. Turn the poison into a nourishing foundation for yourself and others. That is the final, most satisfying appraisal of your life. What is the first step you will take today to implement your own financial firewall? Share your commitment in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of self-rescue and triumph.